We are back. Thank you for staying with us. This is Good Morning Kenya, and right about now we are about to have a very, very interesting conversation. I mean, this lady that we will be having on set today has been making headlines in the news all over, not just in Kenya, but in the United States of America as well. And today we're doing it a bit differently because I will be co-hosting with my colleague Mike Migwe. Now, we'll have the one and only Mrs. Huldah Momanyi Hiltsley. She is the House of Representative-elect representing Minnesota's District 38A. And by the way, she has made history becoming the first Kenyan state representative in United States history. There she is. You can see her on our screens right there. Mike, before I get to, I don't know if we'll call her Meshimiwa or what, but before we get to Madam Huldah, Mike, is this something you would have foreseen?
Personally, it's not something I would have foreseen, but I think Kenya, in a way, has set a precedent. Because in 2017, there was another story that happened in Australia. Another Kenyan lady by the name Lucy Gisheha won a seat in the Australian Parliament. So that was history made, and now we're witnessing another history made by another Kenyan lady who is a Minnesota House of Representative-elect. Hilda, do we call you Mheshimiwa, or how do you want us to address you?
I mean, to be honest, first of all, thank you so much for this opportunity to connect with you and to have this conversation. So I'm not much into titles, but the formal title here in the U.S. is Representative-elect Hiltsley. But sasa tuko hapo Kenya, so whatever you want to call me, I'll accept, because I'm learning the protocols of Kenya and how they address their leaders.
Okay, so probably just for people to get to understand what being a representative for, you know, Minnesota, what is it equivalent to when it comes to Kenya? Is it an MP? Is it
a senator?
Yeah, senator. Like, what is it equivalent
to? Yeah, so that's a very interesting question, and that's a question that I've grappled with for a very long time, because you can't compare, you know, apples and oranges. The structure of the Kenyan government is completely different from how we are structured here. You know, if you look at the U.S., especially the state level, let's just talk about the state level. You know, we have the lowest political position is the school board, and then you go to the city council, and then you go to the commissioners, and then from there you go to the state legislators, which is made of the two chambers, right? The House of Representatives and the Senate. And then obviously you continue to climb up to the Congress, right? And so when you look at my role, you know, it's hard to kind of compare. But if you put it from the context of the U.S. as a country compared to Kenya as a country, I would probably say a very powerful MCA, because there was a debate online where I saw people were like, oh, that's just a small seat, you know, it's just an MCA if you compare it to Kenya. But again, if you think about it, you know, the GDP of Minnesota is definitely bigger than the whole country of Kenya. But really, at the end of the day, it's kind of hard to compare exactly what this role entails when you compare it to Kenyan politics.
You know, it's interesting. Your story is unique and interesting. But to someone who is watching right now, I think we should start with a little background of who you are. Who is Huldah Momanyi Hiltsley?
I am a proud daughter of Kenyan immigrants. My family and I relocated to the U.S. Well, I relocated to the U.S. when I was 9 years old. And I really grew up here, and really the biggest influence was the African-American church that I grew up in. And so, yes, I came here to the U.S. when I was 9, and then I grown up here, gone to school here. I wanted to earn my master's, you know, my 3 undergrad degrees in international business, international relations, and reconciliation studies. So I've definitely eaten a lot of books. And then I went on to get my master's in global business management. And I currently do a lot of data privacy, data governance, managing a lot of data privacy operations for a major global international company. And I'm just passionate. I love my job, but I'm passionate passionate about community and really understanding, getting a glimpse of what the possibilities are here in the U.S. A lot of people, I don't know if they know, but my family was literally 48 hours away from being deported from this country back to Kenya. And for the longest time, my family fought the immigration system, the very complex immigration system here in the U.S. And we then petitioned Senator Paul Wellstone, who came and really championed for our family to stay in this country. And within 48 hours, our case was overturned. And who would have ever thought that 22 years later, I would be sitting here running for a political seat in this country, not only running, but winning as an immigrant woman in a very diverse district. So my story is definitely a testament of resilience and consistency and support and sacrifice. Because I could sit here and say, this moment was definitely credited to all of this life experiences and opportunities that I have been very fortunate to be afforded.
Truly a journey of resilience right there, from just being 48 hours to being deported to being a member-elect right now. Truly inspiring. But you mentioned that when it comes to your education background, you've done international relations, international business, and business management as well. So where did the love for politics come in? When did that come in for you?
Yeah, so that came in. I think it was there because of how I grew up. My parents were very instrumental in terms of, ingraining in us, public service, giving back to the community. Not only here, I remember growing up and we had a lot of, people coming from Kenya staying with us. I don't remember, a day where I had a room to myself, right? I was either sharing it with a family member or somebody who come from Kenya that needed a place to stay. And so we learned early on to give back to the community and serve. But when you talk about the actual notion of getting involved in politics, I think that came later in life when I got involved in leadership roles in my community. And the last leadership role I held was the president of one of the biggest Kenyan organizations in the Midwest here in the U.S. called Momanyi. And that's when I really started to engage with the leaders at the Capitol. And I realized that I was just banging my head against the wall in terms of getting resources to our community. And that was during the COVID-19 pandemic. And I realized that, my voice didn't matter. The was already there, and if you weren't able, if you weren't one of the legislators really championing, your cause, it was impossible to penetrate that. And so, I after going through those experiences of feeling like I wasn't represented, nobody was hearing me, I thought to myself, well, why not run? If I can run and then I could be at the table and then I can be making these policies and being a part of that decision table where I can be able to champion for, issues that were concerned to my community. And that's really when I started to think about, what does it mean to run? I had never held a political office before, and so I think that's where, this whole notion of actually seriously considering running for office began. And that was about, 7 years ago. And then 2 years later, I ran for Senate. And that was the first time running, and we didn't win, but the lessons learned was definitely a win for us, and that helped us to really strategize and put a really strong game plan together that has gotten us to this point.
Your story is fascinating, and let's take you back to the instance where you narrowly dodged deportation. I would like to know, how did that shape your perspective on leadership, especially a people-centered type of leadership?
I think I was too young to even analyze the magnitude of that moment. All I knew was that we didn't have to sit here and hide anymore. All I remember was thinking we can finally be free to be who we are, and really enjoyed the opportunities that this country affords its citizens, right? So I never really thought about it from a leadership perspective, but now that I look back, now that I'm a little bit older, and I've gotten into the spaces of leadership and of politics, I'm realizing that moment really was significant in the sense that, the Senator Paul Wellstone, God rest his soul, he passed away a couple of years ago, he championed for a family, for people he didn't know, right? We were just a part of his constituency, and we petitioned his office. And because he was in that position of power, of influence, he was able to literally change the trajectory not only of my life, but my family's life, and now this community. And so back then I didn't realize that, but now that I look back and think about that moment and what it meant, it was truly, it was centered, it was rooted in God's will for my life. Back then I didn't know it. But here I am sitting here as a representative-elect because of what a politician did, what a good politician did, fighting for the people and really trusting and believing in humanity.
That's amazing. Now, I would love to know how your campaigning process was like, and maybe just how different are political campaigns in the U.S. if we try to compare them with how they are here in the country, in Kenya.
So that is another question that I've been getting, and obviously, there's protocol, there's rules and regulations here that govern the whole campaigning process, from the campaign finance board that monitors literally every single cent, how it's spent, and it's public knowledge of how much you've collected in and how you've spent that money. And so I would say the biggest difference is the transparency in the process, because you are running for a political office and you are running to represent taxpayers, voters who are paying taxes to make sure that they hold their leadership, that their leaders accountable, their elected leaders accountable, and then also here, politicians. What I've seen, right, and when I talk to my friends there, it's about making sure that you're talking to voters about, give me your vote, I give you something, right? Is that exchange, that transactional exchange of something for a vote? But here in the U.S. is the opposite, right? Like, you literally have to talk to somebody, go to their doors, and have a conversation one-on-one about what's important to them, and really it's an exchange of policy for the person's vote, right? So it's this policy exchange instead of some sort of a mandatory value that is added there. And again, when I go back to the regulatory landscape of campaigning here in the U.S., it's very strict, and those laws are put there for a reason, and I'm actually very proud of that, because it allows the candidate to literally get to the root of really campaigning and getting to the doors, getting to the voter, and championing a message of what you will do for the voter, and having that voter decide with no pressure in terms of what they'll be getting. Instead, they are voting for somebody that aligns with their values, that has demonstrated a track record that they will deliver, and that's how we here campaign and earn the support of voters.
Running a campaign is not easy. Everybody knows that. But also there are other aspects of your life that have to continue concurrently with you campaigning. You are a businesswoman, you are a mother, you are a wife. How did you strike all that balance?
We women are very resilient and strong, and we can multitask like nobody's business. But yes, thank you for asking me that. I think you're the first person who's actually asked me how I've been able to balance all of this. And I have to honestly give credit where credit is due, and that is to my husband, Mr. Ondieki. Obviously, the Hiltsley name comes from that, but when we first started to date, not a lot of people in my family could pronounce his name, even his first name. So, we sat down as a family, and we were like, you're not going anywhere, I'm not going anywhere. All right, so it was me and my cousins, and we were like, you need a Kenyan name, right? So we gave him a couple of names, and he chose Mr. Ondieki. And so I have to give him a lot of credit for really allowing me and supporting me and loving on me, right? To be able to be out here campaigning and have my back at the home front, making sure our two children are, taken care of and have a normal, whatever that looks like, a normal life while mommy is out here campaigning. And I have to give credit because, like you said, my brother, it is so hard to campaign because you are away from your family for a very lengthy time. I mean, I've been campaigning for 1.5 years now, from the moment I said, hey, I'm interested in running to this very moment. And so I've been away and really lost a lot of time, with my family, but my husband and my extended family for really stepping in and bridging that gap. For example, my mom, who would just literally cook food, bring it to the door and leave it there and just send me a text, hey, there's food at the table. I mean, on the door, right? Or she would come in and set everything up or give my husband a break with the children or with anything that I needed in the household. And of course, the community in general, who really rallied around me and really stepped in to fill in that gap.
Yeah, you've clearly been able to beat the odds. Not just that, whereby you got to know how to strike that balance, but also correct me if I'm wrong, but as a minority, because first of all, you're an immigrant, you're African, and you're a woman. So you are a minority. So what lessons would you want or would you love people to pick from that? From your story, what lessons would you want an immigrant who's watching us, who's, there as well, lesson to every woman out here? What lessons would you love them to just speak?
Yes, absolutely. I keep on going back to that resilience. We as African immigrants here, most of us has, we have a testimony of how we got here. We have our experiences, and if you are an immigrant, foreign land, especially in the U.S., especially with everything that, the beauty of the U.S. and also the ugly side of the U.S. with, that is still rooted in racism, and then you add to that a woman. We just saw what just happened. We had a very capable woman, who was running for President, Kamala Harris, and this country is like, we're not ready for a woman. And so it is very difficult. That's another layer besides the basics of running a successful campaign. To be a woman, especially a Black woman, and an immigrant at that, there's definitely some serious work that goes into that. And a part of the challenges that I saw on the campaign trail is first of all, my skills and my experiences being questioned time and time again. People really asking me, are you really that educated? Or, I got this a lot from our community. And again, as being an immigrant woman, there's these double standards that, as a candidate we go through where your own community is looking at you going, who gave you permission to run? And in my head, I'm thinking, did you go to the white candidate and ask them who gave you permission to run? But at the end of the day, I also applaud my community as well. They stood by me in one way or another to making sure that I got to this place. But the challenges are real. Racism is real. I remember campaigning and police, being called on my team and I because we, quote, did not belong in a certain neighborhood because it was more affluent and they didn't believe we were there for the right reasons. And obviously, once the police arrived and they discovered that, I was the candidate and for the majority of those situations, I've created a really good relationship with the police department here. So they already knew who I was and they definitely apologized. Or when I go to a door and somebody literally slams the door on my face. But besides those challenges, I have to acknowledge that the other side of it, the beautiful diversity that, is within my district, where I saw a lot of people from different backgrounds really coming and rallying around my community. So those challenges were just a small voice within, the bigger picture where, I won by 65% of the vote. That means that this community was ready for a Black woman, an immigrant woman, to represent the most diverse district in the whole entire state of Minnesota. And so I want to encourage women, don't be afraid, especially diaspora women, and just in general. When we come here to this country, we literally just focus on going to work, going to church, and going home, or going to school. Those things. But now we have to think about shifting our mind, right? Because we are no longer thinking about going back to Kenya, because our kids, we're having kids here, we're investing here, we're buying homes here. We need to think about what does it look like to build an environment where our kids are going to thrive. My kids are not going back to Kenya to benefit or to rip or to stay in those mansions that we've built in Kenya. They're not. This is their home, and we have to have that mind shift to think about what does it look like to actually be involved civically, because when we talk about sustainability of our community, when we talk about resources for our community, because we're not going anywhere at this point, we have to think about, making sure that we are at the table, and that table is at the Capitol, at the state, in Congress, where our very unique voices are represented.
Yeah, and Mrs. Huldah has clearly set the pace.
Yes.
She has clearly just owned that table,
Yes.
brought her own table. And, there's where she asked that she was being asked, who gave you the permission to run? And I'm thinking,
you don't really need the permission from anyone.
why even ask for permission? Who said,
no.
You need to ask for permission?
Yes.
But right now, we take a very short break. Don't you go too far. We'll be back to continue with this conversation with the House of Representative-elect Minnesota.
If you're just joining us, you're watching Good Morning Kenya here on KBC Channel 1, and the conversation we are having with Representative-elect, that is Huldah Momanyi Hiltsley, who has been elected to the Minnesota House of Representatives. Huldah, I want you to talk about the importance of diversity and inclusion in political representation.
Yes, I think that is one of my reasons why I decided to run for a political seat here in the most diverse district in the whole entire state of Minnesota. And I would even go as far as saying it's the most diverse district in the whole entire U.S. because if you look at the racial breakdown within my district, we have all of the different racial ethnicities, and the biggest piece of that pie is the black. The black population, which is, again, if you break that down even further, is that the biggest percentage of that is the African immigrant community. And if you break down that further, it's the Liberian community, and then the Kenyan, Nigerian, and then all of these other communities that come from the African continent. And so why I was super just excited and passionate about fighting to get a seat at the table is because when we looked at policies, when grants were being written, when we looked at laws that were being passed, our voices, which is very unique, how we do things, how we operate in this society, was not being represented. I remember when I was the president of Momanyi and really reaching out to one of the State Department offices and saying the grant that you guys just put out does not factor that as small businesses, most of them are rent from our own homes, right? And so when you put in there that the requirement is this, and that literally cuts out a whole population, group of population that actually need those resources, that's when I started to realize that, we're not at the table to tell them, can you rewrite this grant to look like this? Can we work on this law to reflect the voices and the needs and the concerns and the issues of this particular population? That's why I truly believe representation, good policies requires good representation that actually brings all of the voices at the table.
That is well in, but also there's also the aspect of having less or no elected leaders, especially for minorities, for minority backgrounds. What is the impact of that, and how can that be remedied henceforth?
I mean, we've seen that impact time and time again in different aspects of our community, our society, right? I mean, the civil rights movement is rooted exactly in that, right? Where we didn't have representation when our constitution of this country was created, and then when, Martin Luther King was fighting for the civil rights, the freedoms of the African Americans in this country, we didn't have a say with, the laws that were being passed about, the Black community in this country. And that civil rights continues to be a vocal point in terms of representation. And that has been the fight, to be able to be at the table, to be able to bring that different and a unique perspective that make up the tapestry of the American population, which is very diverse, right? And so when you look at, what representation means, and when it's missing at the table, we look at our businesses. Our businesses still continue to struggle because, we don't have people who are championing our unique challenges that we are seeing within our businesses. Our schools, our kids continue to slide back and not get the resources that we need because guess what? Most of our, the African immigrant community, these kids are brilliant, but they speak multiple languages, but they're not accounted for in terms of resources to address the cultural differences that these kids bring to the classroom. And so making sure that we are hiring, teachers who reflect that population, making sure that we are providing, schools with adequate resources to address those challenges that our kids are seeing. When you look at our healthcare, right, we right now, I know that we lack representation in terms of a simple thing as translation, right? Having somebody there to translate to your medical team, in regards to how you're feeling, what's going on with you. We lack that. When we talk about translation again, when bills are being passed or when there's important information that needs to be passed to the community, we don't have it in our languages to making sure that our people know exactly what's going on. So if you look at every aspect of our society, if we don't have representation there, we as a community, we as, our families, we see a backslide, and that's why it's so important that we have representation so that we can bring in that voice to definitely bridge that gap.
Mm-hmm. And speaking about that and just what you've talked about, the fact that some things are lacking, when it comes to representation. Now you have both your feet inside. You have gotten the job. You have been elected. What are your legislative priorities, maybe, from now going forth?
Yes, so when we talk about my priorities, they are really rooted in my community and my constituency. And this last year of literally engaging voters, it doesn't matter what party you align with, I set out to be a representative who will be representing everyone, all the voters in this district. And even non-voters, because we have, again, in my community, permanent residents, individuals who, yes, they have permanent residency in this country, but they don't have the right to vote. So I am also representing their voices at the Capitol. And so when I look at that, it is something that I don't take lightly, and it is something that, I think that, we need to acknowledge as a community. Mm-hmm. And I don't know if I answered your question. I think I'm missing something there. Yeah,
I was asking about your priorities now, going forward.
Oh, yes, my priorities. Of course, yes. I was going down the rabbit hole of they're rooted in my community. And those priorities are very simple. My constituency is asking that I'm fighting for a safe and thriving community, and what that looks like from public safety. So I want to champion, a public safety policy and law that really is rooted in community, where community have a say in what that looks like, where we're supporting our law enforcement and other agencies to be well prepared and equipped to address, the public safety issue, making sure that we are creating laws that hold people accountable for their actions, but at the same time are fair, right? So that's number one. I look at our education, making sure that our schools are fully funded, where we are not, creating this heavy burden on our teachers to be a disciplinarian, to be mental health specialists, to be all of these things to our kids, and then we expect them to teach our kids to thrive in the educational setting. And so making sure that our schools have the resources to be able to make sure that our kids are thriving and are really, that they're getting and receiving world-class education that we pride ourselves in. So that's number 2. Making sure that our workers are getting livable wages, where, our unions are strong and they're protected, and making sure that, they are able to go to the bargaining table with whoever and have a strong front in terms of making sure that they are fighting for the workers' rights. They are fighting for fair and livable wages, that they are fighting for healthcare benefits for the workers. And then I also want to champion small businesses, because my constituency is made of small businesses who have gone through a tremendous trial, especially with the COVID-19, where most of the small businesses closed. But within my district, they're still here, they're still resilient. So making sure that their voice is also being heard at the Capitol. I mean, I could go on and on about healthcare, right? Making sure that we do have affordable healthcare for everybody within our community, where, it doesn't matter where you come from, it doesn't matter your background, you are getting access to healthcare. And then lastly, housing. Here in the U.S., we all are in different, levels of life. Whether you are a young person who is finally ready to, leave your parents' home and get your first apartment, to, people who are ready, young families who are looking for their first home. For example, my husband and I, we finally bought our first home, within the last year or so, and so making sure that my community, my constituency have access to affordable, housing options that fit their current need. That's definitely going to be on top of my agenda as well.
Well, you were elected as a Democrat, and now the president-elect of the United States is a Republican, that is Donald Trump. So from a policy standpoint, what do you foresee as a challenge, especially when it comes to issues of immigration, healthcare, economic opportunity, especially for immigrants?
Again, as a Democrat, it's definitely a bittersweet to be fighting so hard as a party in general, not just my race, but as a party in general, to really see the turnout. And if you ask me, why, Kamala Harris, Vice President Kamala Harris lost this race, and my governor, Tim Walz, is because people just didn't turn out to vote. Democrats. I'm going to put it on my party. Democrats didn't turn out to vote. If you see the numbers that came out, from, the last election where, Biden won by, a couple of million, and then you see the numbers now, about 20 million voters didn't vote. The majority of them, are aligned with the Democratic Party. And I get it. People were just sick and tired of politics, and I get that. But unfortunately, it is what it is. We're here. This is a democracy. We have to, respect the voices of the people and really now sit here and grapple with the idea of, well, it's not even an idea anymore. It's the reality, right, of a Trump presidency and his administration, where he's been very clear about what he's going to do. We saw what he did last term when he was the president, and that's going to impact, especially, for example, the Supreme Court of this country, where he literally was able to stack the Supreme Court to be so conservative that the policies and the laws that they passed and will impact us for the next 40 years, right? And so when you break it down to the immigrant community, there's a couple of things at stake right now, right? So we are looking at strict immigration, policies and visa requirements. It's already a very complex topic, right? But now, it's going to alienate a big population that make up the tapestry of this country when it comes to our economy, when it comes to, our society. And so that's going to be impacted. You're looking at refugees and asylum seekers, where people are literally looking for a safe haven, to come to, and they're going to be impacted. The one that is personal to me is this DECA. It is definitely an act that, we are very, nervous about and what he's going to do. And that program is basically protects, especially kids, children, babies who came here when they were, just babies. For example, I have a family member who came here when, her parents brought her to this country when she was only 3 years old. This is all she knows. She doesn't know Kenya, right? And so to be on the verge of being deported to a country that she has no idea about, it's definitely something that, is a real concern and a real fear for a lot of immigrant families. And then lastly, employment and economic opportunities. He's been very clear about where he aligns. He supports, big corporations and don't really care about the small mom and pop shops that really make up the tapestry of this country, the working people. So we are going to see, a decline in that and really making sure that, our economy in general, the workforce in this country, that, the immigrant community, the immigrants have built this country, that's definitely on the line. And again, only time will tell. But from his, campaign, from his presidential administration last time to his campaign rhetoric, as a Democratic Party, we're hunkering down for the next 4 years and making sure that each state, with their own liberties, can definitely put in, mechanisms to make sure that its citizens are protected from whatever happens at the national level.
Mm-hmm. And I still want to pick on that just a bit. Is that a struggle for you? And will that maybe interfere or with your maneuvering as in taking your responsibility for the position that you've been elected?
That's a really good question because, and it's hard to answer, but all I have to say is that, if you look at the news, this is public knowledge, so I'm not sharing anything that I shouldn't be sharing. And I want to definitely be careful how I phrase this. So if you look at the news, especially at the state of Minnesota and the House of Representatives, the lower chamber of the legislature, we are tied, and that's history in the making. I think the last time we were tied, it was back in, I think, 1970s. And so as a rookie coming in, I'm coming in with, having a House of Representatives being 67 Republicans and 67 House of Representatives. So we no longer hold the majority like we did the last legislative cycle, where we had what we call a trifecta, where our governor was a Democrat, and then the House of Representatives, we had the majority, and then the Senate, we had the majority. So we definitely, took advantage of that, and as a state, passed very progressive, agenda, which, we were able to accomplish then. But now this time around, obviously, we continue to have, Tim Walz as our fearless DFL, governor, and then we also were able to maintain the Senate. The question is now in the House of Representatives and what that's going to look like, who is going to be, how do we, talk about power sharing within these two parties to make sure that we, move this state forward and be a model for the rest of the U.S. in regards to how we are going to conduct, a joint leadership sharing agenda. And so, I've already done my orientation, and I'm going to continue doing my orientation until January when the legislative session takes into place and when I'm sworn in. And the conversations we're having as a party is what do we need to do to come to the table and make sure that we should make sure we are, the power sharing agreement, obviously we are okay with that, but also provides us with an opportunity as elected officials and as leaders to literally put our differences aside and say, at the end of the day, we are here to work for the people, and that's where I'm gonna come in, and that's the kind of mentality I'm bringing to the table, saying, I don't care who you are, I don't care what party you align yourself with, we have to reach across the aisle, both of the two parties, and make sure that we are working for the people of Minnesota, the people who voted us into office.
Yeah, and still on that, as you said, you are there to work for the people, and servant leadership is what is always applauded, So when we talk about servant leadership, what does that look like for you? From your point of view, what is servant leadership, and how is it supposed to look like?
I think servant leadership for me is rooted in transformative leadership, meaning that, it's about serving the people and meeting them where they are, right? And one of the things that I really want to do is making sure that I'm accessible. I'm a representative who is able to, be able to be accessed by its constituency and the people who voted me in. So when we talk about servant leadership, it comes down to, putting my personal agenda aside and making sure that I am listening, I'm proactive, I'm transparent. I am bringing all of these people to the table to talk about what's important. Is bringing in experts and knowing that I'm limited in my knowledge about all of these different aspects. If you ask me about, a data privacy, data protection regulation, I can talk to you all day about that, but I don't know, everything about all of these other different topics that I have to bring myself up to, speed on. And so to me, when I talk about servant leadership, is making sure that, key important voices are at the table, even those that you don't think, have something to say, making sure that I'm intentional about bringing in people who, never thought that they could even approach a representative or an elected official, making sure that we are creating room for everybody to have a say in that, and that I'm representing my community in a manner that do say, yes, your voices have been heard and they're being represented well.
Even as you are achieving or breaking the glass ceiling, you've stayed true to your roots, and I would love to know how has that shaped your approach to leadership?
I have to applaud my parents for, how they raised my siblings and I. People are shocked that I know more Kisii than I know Swahili, but the fact that I know both languages, I can understand them both fully. And for the Kisii part, I can speak fluent Kisii. And obviously, I think I've done some interviews now where, I'm struggling with my Swahili, but really that's a testament of taking pride in who I am as a Kenyan American. And because of where I'm from and root that I come from, and that journey of resilience and the challenges that my family had to, and the fight that we had to, fight to be in this country, just reminds me that I too belong here, that we paid our dues to be here, and it's truly just humbling, knowing that I get to be a representative that really shatters that glass ceiling for our people. Not only for the Kenyan community, but for the whole, African immigrant community in this state to, take up the mantle. Obviously the Somali community has done a great job of making sure that their voices are heard. For example, there's a couple of universities here that are literally teaching Somali language. Wow. Right? And they have a representative in Congress in DC. What about the rest of us who've been here for this long? And so it's truly an honor to be the first Kenyan born, right? Because the first Kenyan, obviously, that had roots was Obama. And the fact that I am the first Kenyan born to ever be elected into office in this country is definitely a testament of how far the Kenyan community has come in this country to be able to say, we too belong at the table.
Yes. And owing to that, I'm tempted to ask, do you miss Kenya?
Kenya?
Yes.
Absolutely. I will always have Kenya in my heart, and that's why I'm very intentional in making sure that I maintain, my Kisii traditions and culture and the language. Right now, my 6-year-old, we were just joking, and she comes down and she's like, "Sitaki kelele," and I'm sitting here going, "Wait a second now, where did you learn this?" Right? And having my husband taking that initiative to really learn a little bit of Kisii, so that he can communicate with my grandparents and our elders. So I take pride in that, and I do miss Kenya. And I take the initiative of actually coming there as much as I can. The last time I was there, I think it was last year in January. 2 years ago, actually, I brought my whole entire campaign team to see where I come from, because they were like, we want to see where Mheshimiwa comes from, right? And so I do miss Kenya. And one of the things that I'm super excited about is to see, what's possible within this role. What can we do to collaborate and improve people's lives there in Kenya as well? But obviously, I want to be very clear that my priority is going to be this Senate District 38A constituency. But at the same time, each state, again, like I said, has has opportunities to engage foreign entities and making sure that we are creating a pathways where we are sharing, whether that is cultural exchange or whether that is economic development. And so I'm excited to go to the Capitol. And again, I have no idea what all this entails and what's possible, because a lot of people really are assuming a lot of things about what's possible in this space. And my answer has always been, I don't know. But guess what? I'm going to go to the Capitol, look at what's possible, and then really engage, whoever I need to engage, the key stakeholders, to see if there's that exchange that we can create between the state of Minnesota and Kenya.
Yeah. And we wish you all the very best on that. And as we come to a conclusion of this a conversation that we have been having, when it comes to Kenyans, we normally have the Mutu Wetu syndrome. We really have that. So I can only imagine the number of calls that maybe you've been getting from people back home, the messages, and for those who can't get you, don't have your direct contact, probably on social media. Is this something you have witnessed? I'm just curious.
Absolutely not.
Yeah.
It has been surreal in the sense that the overwhelming just support and love that the Kenyan people have showed me. Honestly, not just in Kenya, but the whole entire world. I got a call from, a distant cousin who lives in Germany that I had no idea about. When she told me, well, my mom gave me your number, and she told me I'm your distant cousin. I just want to call to congratulate you. Yeah. And I'm sitting here going, I have no idea who your mom is, but thank you. I appreciate it. And so this is something that I'm not used to because the people who know me know I'm very relational. I'm very, I just want to be with the people. And so all of this attention that I'm getting is definitely new. But at the same time, I know it's rooted in just this pride that the Kenyan people around the world have, that one of their own has made it in the U.S. And so I am going to sit in this moment because I know that when January comes around, when I'm officially sworn in, I won't even have time because my commitment will be for the voters who voted me in. So I have stopped answering messages because now my inbox is, thousands of messages. And because I had a friend of mine who is trying to, keep tabs in all of this, she said, Huldah, I can't even keep up anymore. But I just want to say to any Kenyan, wherever they are around the world, I'm so appreciative. I'm humbled by the just outpouring of love. And obviously, I've been getting, clips of, members of parliament who are also energized and excited that we have our own, also a member of parliament, quote, right? Here in Minnesota. And so it has definitely been, a whirlwind for me, but I'm taking it a stride at a time.
Yeah, I definitely knew that was a must. It had to be there because the Mutu Wetu syndrome in us is just so loud. Anyway, congratulations, Mrs. Huldah, for clinching that particular seat, and we wish you all the very best as you maneuver, this new position that you now have. This is where we get to end this conversation. Thank you so much to each and every one of you who has been tuned in. From my colleague, Mike Megwe, and I, and on behalf of everyone, this was a conversation of everyone who made this show a success till this point. That was a conversation we were having with Mrs. Huldah Momanyi Hiltsley, the House of Representative-elect, representing Minnesota's District 38A, and she was coming to us live from Brooklyn Park, Minnesota, USA. Thank you so much for staying with us.